building my own shipping container home. Join me on my journey from construction to completion of my mortgage-free home on a homestead. So welcome back, everybody. This is part 1 of 3 of a 3-part series where I'll be breaking down the fully finished final plans for my DIY shipping container home. In part 1, we'll cover the architectural plans. In part 2, the structural plans. And part 3, the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing plans. Architectural plans was one of those things I kinda overlooked in the process of designing and ultimately getting the permit to build. The reason? Well, because very early on, I created a very detailed, fully fleshed out 3D model of the container home and a simplistic 2D black and white traditional architectural drawing of the house seemed not very useful. However, I later learned from my structural and MEP engineers that I hired that they would actually need finalized architectural plans in an AutoCAD file format in order for them to finish and create their own MEP and structural drawings. So I was basically forced to create them. So looking to save money where I can, the idea of dropping another $1,000 for an architect to draw out some simple 2D plans was simply out of the question. But I lucked out. By simply converting the highly detailed 3D SketchUp model I made of the container home into a standard architectural top-down view, I basically had what I needed. And that's definitely a tip that I would suggest. If you're going to make detailed drawings or models, consider starting with a 3D model first, because if you're using a program like SketchUp, you can always convert the 3D into 2D, and you've basically got yourself the architectural drawings. From there, SketchUp conveniently allows you to convert the SketchUp file into an AutoCAD file, which is the program my MEP engineer used and needed the architectural plans in. The entire 3D model of my shipping container home, fully fleshed out with standard shipping container sizes and all the nuances of the foundation of the home itself, is available to download right now. The full 3D model. Just click the link down there in the description below to learn more. For me, I wanted to keep this house as simple and cost-effective as possible. I wasn't looking to get all fancy with cantilevered containers stacked at odd angles off each other and all that stuff. I'm here to build a functional and reliable home that doesn't force me into a massive mortgage for the rest of my life. And so I found that 3 40-foot high cube containers placed side by side would be the ideal approach. Surprisingly, I later learned from the Containing Luxury YouTube channel that he believes the 3 40-footers side by side is kind of the limit before building a container home that starts to lose its cost effectiveness. The final design of my home went through a few stages, one of which ended up costing me an extra couple $100 because I changed the design halfway through and forced my engineers to rework some stuff. And definitely another really big tip. Make sure you finalize completely your plans before giving any subcontractors the green light, because it'll end up costing you. As you can see here, this was the original design. I was pretty satisfied with it and was really ready to just dive in and go for it, but upon a suggestion from my dad, a new version began to spawn. My dad liked the idea of somehow moving the front sliding glass doors over so that it lined up with the single back door. An effort to accommodate this eventually transformed into a somewhat significant revamp where the single back door was converted into a double sliding door and lined up with the front sliding doors. The result, in my opinion, is an undeniably superior design from an aesthetic view. Now, walking into the home, you're greeted by a more open floor space and a beautiful view to what's beyond the other side. The amount of extra light and sense of openness is incomparable to the original design. Another feature I spent quite some time working on was the interior doors. I knew that sliding pocket doors were a great way to save some space compared to traditional swinging doors, and I had seen some of these really nice barn doors in other homes. So I decided to go with these. Surprisingly enough, the barn doors took quite a bit of research and planning to figure the tiny details about how they're installed, how much wall you need on either side, etc. But then, I ran into a bit of an issue with the bathroom door. Normally I would have used a barn door here, but there was no place to slide it into or over. I mean, technically I guess the barn door could have slid to the left over the closet doors, but that would have created a conflict in functionality, so I decided to go with a standard accordion door. I think it'll do just fine. The bathroom itself was also a pretty interesting one to try to configure and figure out. As you can see, it's not the biggest bathroom, but then again, I don't really care for size and space in that area. But as you can see, the bigger I make the bathroom, the smaller everything else becomes. If I widen it here, I end up losing some of the kitchen and the closet space. I think the kitchen would be fine if a bit smaller, but not the closet. Then if I stretch the bathroom out in this direction, now I'm losing some of the bedroom space. And as a consequence, I have to move the closet over, which means I have to move the doorway over, which means I'm now cutting into this small bedroom here. Also notice that if I have to move this doorway here over, I'd have to start tearing down this piece of leftover wall from the shipping container itself. And in case you didn't know, you can't just go around tearing down every wall and not consider if it needs some kind of reinforcement. And indeed, that's definitely one thing I went back and forth with my structural engineer about. In the next episode of Think Outside the Container, I'm actually going to be going into deep detail on the actual structural plans and the structural designs and the drawings itself. So you're notified when that next video comes out. Be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell icon while you're at it so you're notified when that video is released. So let's talk a little bit about this room right here. It measures about 10 feet by 7.5 feet. Basically, this is intended to be a baby/small child's room. I think by the time that potential child grows up, he or she will need a bigger space, and if a second kid comes along, well, that's why I think one day I might add a second story to the home by dropping another 40-foot container on top, like this. And then this room will probably become some kind of a storage area with a circular staircase leading up. But again, those are way in the future plans that I'm not really trying to think about right here, right now. Overall, I'd say the most challenging part about these architectural design, the basic design of the house, was finding the balance between what was aesthetically and visually appealing, but also code compliant and that could be built structurally sound. I mean, there are codes on how far away a toilet has to be positioned from the wall. And of course, I wanted to position the toilet in a spot that the drain underneath wouldn't conflict with the steel beams underneath the container. Once again, the 3D model was fantastic because it allowed me to test whether or not the drainage systems were positioned in such a way that wouldn't require me to start cutting off some of these structural steel beams here underneath. And again, this fully finished, highly detailed 3D model is available to download right now. Just click the link in the description below to learn more. And so that's it for this episode of Think Outside the Container. In the next episode, I'm going to be going deep into the structural plan. I'm talking about foundation, the concrete columns that support the container home, the shear walls, all that kind of nitty-gritty structural engineering stuff. I'm going to be going into deep detail on that. Showing you guys drawings and all the other stuff. So again, definitely subscribe, click the button down below, hit the bell while you're at it so you're notified when the next video comes out. And again guys, as always, anything's possible when you think outside the container.